The cockpit shook with a low, angry vibration, the kind that crawled through the seat rails and into her spine. Outside the canopy, desert haze smeared the horizon into a pale gold strip, and far below, thin black smoke curled from where someone was losing. The GAU-8 smell, burnt metal and propellant, still clung to the air from the last run. Captain Maya Fable Rios tightened her gloved hand on the stick until the leather creaked. On the left MFD, a JTAC marker flashed, overlaid with a big red no-fire zone creeping closer to the friendlies. Her right thumb hovered over the mic switch, but it trembled once, almost imperceptibly. The last thing in her headset had not been the JTAC's strained voice. It had been her own command. Viper 2-1, abort, RTB, COS denied, ROE change, copy? That had been clear, cold, and final. Below, the pinned platoon was breathing in short, ragged calls, trying to sound brave. She could see dust geysers from incoming rounds, too close to the IR strobes. The JTAC came back, and this time there was no radio polish. Hog, they're getting walked in on. If you don't hit that gun, they're done. Her thumb tapped the throttle once, indecisive. Orders versus eyes. Career versus men on the ground. The disciplined part of her brain repeated, "You heard the commander. Stand down." The part of her that had watched too many evac bags loaded on C-17s said, "If you leave, you will hear them in your sleep." Maya rolled her A-10C slightly to get one more look, the pipper almost begging to be driven down the hill. Hard cut. 8 hours earlier. The heat hit her first, thick, metallic, and restless, even inside the squadron building's hallway. Captain Maya Rios had been in desert rotations before, but this forward wing at Al Rayyan AB felt tighter, more watched. The ops room was packed, screens glowing with ISR feeds and SIGACTs rolling in a ribbon. Someone had scrawled in dry erase above the main display, "Win the fight, not the headlines." Maya slid into a seat near the front as the operations chief, Lieutenant Colin Stroud, tapped his tablet to bring up the day's Frago update. "Listen up. Hire just pushed updated ROE for urban and peri-urban engagements," he said. His tone was not angry, just tired from explaining the same thing to pilots who wanted cleaner wars. Bottom line, no kinetic effects inside 200 meters of a flagged structure without positive confirmation from ISR or ground. If it looks like a home, school, clinic, or religious site, we don't shoot. Someone finished from the back. Stroud cut him a look. We don't shoot until we know, and if theater says abort, you abort. Maya kept her notebook open. She already knew the printed ROE. She wanted the subtext. "Sir," she said, keeping her voice even, "what if ground is in contact, and they can see what ISR can't?" "That's what I mean by abort, Rios." He pulled up a Yabu clip. Grainy video of a previous week's strike. Smoke too close to a courtyard. Theater is spooked after this. You get calls from JTACs who are breathing hard and begging for guns, I get it. But the people whose signatures are on our deployment orders? They don't want that video on a feed again. Her jaw flexed once. She thought of a mountain valley years ago, listening to a JTAC go from confident to panicked, to very, very quiet. If someone had bent, just a little. Maja Keegan, her current flight lead, leaned over and murmured, "Don't pick that fight today, Fable." She wrote anyway, "Friendly lives, Kati, career?" Then underlined it and circled JTAC trust. Stroud continued, "We have a patrol from 2nd Platoon, Bravo Company pushing into Wadi Midian tonight. ISR window is thin. Pred's getting pulled for a higher priority target, so we may not have eyes when they need us. That means you fly smart. If you don't have PID, you don't just make it up because you want to be a hero. Maya looked at the patrol route on the map. Narrow valley, buildings clustered like teeth, a textbook place for a machine gun to rake a squad pinned against rock. "Sir, can we put Hog on alert for their window?" she asked. "Just to cut response time." Keegan narrowed his eyes slightly, pushing again, but Stroud surprised her. "You can sit alert," he said, "but understand, if the net says abort, that's not a suggestion." The briefing broke up in low grumbles and laughter. Pilots filed out to life support to check gear. Maya stayed behind a second, watching the patrol's blue icon blinking on the screen. They weren't even outside the wire yet, but she could already see the problem. Tight terrain, inconsistent ISR, and a higher HQ scared of bad optics. That was a triangle that always squeezed air support first. Keegan stopped by her chair. "You flew great in the workups," he said. "Don't let them talk you into making emotional decisions out here. CAS is math, risk, collateral, ROE. You follow the equation, everybody goes home." She looked up at him. "Everybody on the ground doesn't always go home when we follow the equation, sir." He sighed, not dismissive, just older. "Yeah, but everybody in this room keeps their wings. You do the wrong thing for the right reason out here, and Stroud won't be able to keep you from the lawyers." When he left, Maya flipped her notebook to the inside cover. In small, neat letters, she had written a promise years ago. "If I can hear them, I don't leave them." She traced it once with her thumb. Then she added today's date and a note. New ROE, more chances to fail them. Outside, the sun hammered the flight line. Her A-10C sat in its revetment, dull gray, stubborn, loaded for a day that might ask too much. Maya exhaled slowly. Orders were orders, but the desert had a way of ignoring paperwork. And somewhere, a platoon was rehearsing a route through a wadi that would be perfect, if nothing went wrong. The light over the desert changed fast in the evening. 1 minute harsh and white, the next a flat copper wash that made every hangar and revetment look older. Maya sat in the alert room, flight suit half unzipped, helmet on the table beside her, headset plugged into the secure feed. Through the glass, she could see her A-10C turn toward the taxiway, crew chief doing last checks like a man who expected to launch. On her tablet was the patrol overlay. Bravo Company, 2nd Platoon, moving in staggered files through Wadi Midian to hit a small compound suspected of being a logistics node. It wasn't a bad plan, just an ambitious one without full eyes. And ambitious plans like to go wrong at dusk. The net crackled. A calm, clipped American voice came on. That was the JTAC. "Ranger 6 actual, this is Razor 3, radio check." "Solid copy, Razor," the platoon leader answered, a shade younger, a shade more eager. Wind noise pushed against his mic, telling Maya he was already near the mouth of the wadi. Maya leaned in. JTAC first. If the JTAC was squared away, she could work. If the JTAC was nervous, she had to be faster. "Be advised," Razor 3 said. "ISR window just got shortened. We've got overhead for the next 30, then it's gone to priority target north." There was a pause on the ground, boots crunching, someone muttering in the background. The platoon leader came back, masking it with professionalism. "Copy all. We'll push fast." Maya frowned. Fast through narrow terrain without eyes was how you ran straight into a PKM. She toggled the squadron internal. "Fable here. I'm monitoring Razor and the patrol. If they get tickled early, I can be off the ground in 5. Ops Tech replied, bored. "You're cleared to listen, Captain Rios. Remember, you can't self-launch without Stroud." Copy. Back on the ground net, Razor 3 was trying to build himself a safety net. Hire said Hogg is on strip alert, correct? He was asking even though he probably already knew. That was Tone. That was a man who'd been hung out to dry once. Maya thumbed her mic. Razor 3, this is Hogg 2-1 monitoring. We're on alert at Al Rayyan. If you take contact, call type and direction. I'll be airborne immediately. There was a noticeable lift in his voice. Outstanding, Hogg. Good to have you. She smiled despite herself. That was why she over-prepared, because you could feel it through the radio when someone believed you'd show up. The patrol leader began his route, brief for his own men, not knowing a woman in a cool, humming room miles away was listening. We'll enter at grid 24B, move single file until the bend. Expect civilian structures on the east wall. ROE still applies. If we take fire from the structures, we go hard to the west wall, return fire, and call Razor for air. Say again on civilian pattern? Someone asked, breathing a little heavy. Locals transit that route before dark. If they're there, we hold. We're not making YouTube tonight. That was the theater's fear talking, Maya thought, not the platoons. Razor 3 cut in. Hogg, for your essay, I've got single LTD, green smoke only. Terrain may mask me after first turn. Copy single LTD, green smoke, Maya said. If you lose line of sight, talk me on. She took notes. Single laser, limited marking, masked, JTAC after turn, dusk. Every one of those was a friction point later when guns were out and theater wanted clean video. She could already hear Stroud saying, "If you didn't have eyes, you don't shoot." Her dilemma pushed up again. She could close the notebook, trust the system, and fly when told. Or she could step half a foot over the line now, memorize voices, note call signs, picture the terrain, so that if things went loud and HQ got skittish, she'd still have enough to act. She chose the second. Ops, she called back on internal. Request to move the jet to immediate launch posture for Wadi Midian window. I want the crew chief strapped in. There was a pause, then, that's proactive, Rios. It's a narrow wadi with a single laser JTAC and ISR is leaving in 30. If they get hit in the turn, they will not have time to wait for us to spool up. Another pause. Then the tech sighed. Stroud says okay. Don't make him regret it. Outside, the crew chief got the signal and began tightening his sequence. Sun slid lower. Shadows lengthened toward the desert. On the radio, boots kept moving. Men kept breathing, and one JTAC somewhere in a tightening valley sounded just professional enough to hide his worry. Maya looked once more at the map. A perfect place to spring an ambush. A perfect place to make an A-10C pilot choose between orders written in a cooled office and the blood-warm urgency of voices under fire. Night was arriving. So was the problem. The first shout over the net wasn't words, not really. Just the jagged, higher-pitched tone of men who had gone from walking to fighting in half a second. Contact! East wall! East wall! Boots pounded, someone cursed, and then the JTAC's voice snapped into place like a blade. Ranger 6! Break right! Get off the wall! Maya was already on her feet. This is Hogg 2-1. Tick in Wadi Midian confirmed. Request immediate launch. In the ops room, the controller didn't bother arguing. Cleared. Taxi now. 2-2 is 5 minutes behind you. She grabbed her helmet, visor up, and ran for the jet. Outside, the desert was darker than it had been 10 minutes ago. Runway lights were winking on. Her A-10C waited with ladder down, crew chief ready. He saw her pace and barked, APU's spun, ma'am. Good to go. Good man. She climbed, strapped in, helmet sealed, ICS hot. Al Rayyan ground. Hog 2-1 request immediate. TIC support. Wadi Midian. Hog 2-1, cleared to taxi. Expedite. As she rolled, her wingman's voice came up, a notch tight. Fable, this is 2-2. Fuel state is not great. I was not expecting an immediate. I know, Maya said, scanning, hands moving with practiced speed. We'll make it work. Keep your patterns tight, conserve. I need your eyes even if you can't stay long. That valley is a gas trap. Copy. I'll take first in. She shoved the throttles forward. The hog roared down the runway, heavy but eager, and then she was airborne, gear cycling, nose turning toward the wadi. In her headset, the ground fight was clarifying and worsening. Ranger to hog. Troops in the open, taking MG from elevated position east. Grid, stand by. God, they're walking it. Gunfire cracked through his mic. Maya switched to the CAS freck. Razor 3. Hog 2-1 is airborne. 2 minutes out. Mark your position. Green smoke out, but wind is trash. Cough, cough. We are danger close to east structures. I cannot laze from here, terrain masked. So, almost everything she'd worried about was now real. Masked JTAC, shifting smoke, dusk. And ISR? She glanced at the datalink picture, fading. One icon winked out as the UAV left to chase its higher tasking. Al Rayyan approach cleared her direct. She dropped to a lower transit altitude to cut time. The A-10C hummed around her, familiar, solid. 2-2, what's your time? She asked. 4 mics. And then I need to think about bingo. We'll get what we can. The wadi appeared ahead, a dark wound in the desert, walls rising on both sides. Smoke, thin, greenish, drifted uselessly upward from the floor. Tracer arced from the eastern rim down into the valley. Someone up there had good enfilade. She could see muzzle flashes tucked too close to square shapes that could be houses, could be sheds. Exactly what theater hates, she thought. Razor 3, tally green smoke, she called, rolling to get a better angle. Talk me onto the gun. From smoke, 80 meters east, up on the terrace. Small, adobe-looking structure. MG is 10 meters south of it, using it for cover. Friendlies are directly west, within 50, we are pinned. 50 meters. That was this better be perfect range. Copy, pinned. She looked at the MFD, which was now flashing a message from CommandNet. ISR loss, hold fires near structures. Of course. Hog 2-1. A new, cooler voice came over the higher net. Not the JTAC. Command. Be advised, ROE 7 Alpha in effect. Until positive ID separate from civilian pattern, you will not engage near any standing structures east of Wadi. Say your visual. Maya swallowed. Her eyes could see it, even if their sensors couldn't. She could see the geometry. Fire coming down. Friendlies bunched. No civilians running. No family signs. Just combatants who had waited for the patrol to be deepest in. Command Hog 2-1 has troops in contact. Enemy firing from military posture adjacent to structure. Friendlies within 50, I can mark. Negative 2-1. Hold for further ISR or ground clearance. Down below, Razor 3 was no longer calm. 2-1, they are getting bracketed. I have one man hit. If you do not suppress that gun, they will roll us. Maya leveled into a racetrack orbit over the wadi, heart rate up but hands steady. This was the box closing. Ground urgency, command caution, wingman fuel. She could stay high and useless, waiting for someone at a screen to feel comfortable. Or she could move lower now, get the exact sight line, and be ready the second she had even a sliver of permission. She chose the second. 2-2, set up west, high cover, she said. I'm dropping lower for VD. Copy, but make it quick. She pushed the nose down, letting the A-10C sink along the wadi's contour, eyes hunting. There, the MG team was dug in just downslope of a sun-baked wall, firing from prone, muzzle flashes clear. The structure itself was empty in the windows she could see. This wasn't a family home at evening. This was a firing point. "Razor 3, I have your gun," she said. "Maintain cover. I'm working the problem." Above, the command voice came back, more insistent. "Hog 2-1, until ISR reestablishes, do not prosecute. Repeat, do not prosecute." Maya set her orbit, marking, memorizing, burning the scene into her head. Because in about 30 seconds, someone was going to ask her to choose between what she saw and what they were afraid of. And the men below did not have 30 seconds to wait. The wadi was now a single tangled picture in her mind. Friendlies flattened against the west wall, green smoke thinning, and across from them, the hard, rhythmic blink of the enemy gun. Every fifth round seemed to hit too close. Dust plumed around the platoon like someone beating a rug. "Ranger 6, status?" Maya asked, rolling high again to keep SA. A ragged answer came back. "One urgent, one walking. Still taking MG from east. Cannot maneuver. We are fixed. Repeat, fixed." Fixed meant they couldn't flank, couldn't break contact, couldn't do anything but wait for steel from above. "Hog 2-1, this is Command Overwatch." The higher voice cut in, louder than the fight below. "You will hold fires. ISR is currently unable to confirm separation from civilian-type structure. ROE 7 Alpha is in effect. Say your current heading." Maya felt her jaw lock. "Command, 2-1 is in right-hand orbit, eyes on enemy gun, friendlies marked. Enemy is active, sustained fire." "Copy your report, 2-1. Hold fires. Ground must displace or mark enemy away from structure." She glanced down. There was nowhere for them to displace to without getting mowed down. The enemy had chosen the spot too well. "Ranger 3, can you maneuver?" she asked. Negative, and he didn't bother dressing it up. "We step out, we die. Only option is you." There it was, said out loud. She was their only option. Maya eased the hog slightly lower, not enough to look aggressive, but enough to sharpen the angle. Her right hand settled more firmly on the stick, left on the throttles, ready to trade altitude for certainty. Behind her, 2-2 checked in again, more worried. "Fable, fuel's becoming a thing." "Hold west. Keep eyes out for any movers," she said. "I've got the gun." "Hog 2-1, Command insisted. "You are not cleared to engage. You will acknowledge." Her thumb hovered over the PTT. Acknowledge meant she agreed. Acknowledge meant she accepted that what she was watching happen below was unavoidable. She didn't acknowledge. Instead, she said, "Command, request one more pass for positive visual confirmation and to attempt talk on separation. Danger close, friendlies fixed. This will assist ground." There was a pause. Whoever was on the other end was probably conferring, or irritated she was asking for nuance in the middle of a firefight. Finally, "You may conduct a non-kinetic pass for SA. You will not expend." Non-kinetic. Fly by, watch them bleed. "Copy non-kinetic," she said aloud. But in her cockpit she was already planning something less compliant. If she could get directly above and slightly offset, she could see if there was actually anyone in that structure. So far, every window she'd seen had been dead. No heat, no movement, no panicked civilians running from gunfire. This looked and smelled like enemy using a building as armor, not as a home. She rolled in, nose down, letting the A-10C slide toward the wadi on a controlled descent. The valley walls rose on either side. The gun flashes strobed brighter. Tracer whipped upward wildly. Maybe they'd heard her. Maya kept her profile clean. "Ranger, hog on a dry pass overhead," she called. "Keep heads down." Below, the JTAC's voice cracked on the edges now. "Hog, if you have eyes, this is it. We can't hold like this." She saw it all in one heartbeat. The MG team, 2 bodies working the weapon, the structure beside them with a blown-out corner and 0 civilian signature. The platoon huddled behind the west wall, green smoke now a pale ghost. It was the same pattern as the old mission, the one in the mountains, the one where she'd heard men go quiet while she circled, obedient and useless. Her stomach tightened. Orders were supposed to protect people. Right now, the order was protecting an empty wall. She pulled up at the end of the dry pass, climbing back into her orbit. "Command 2-1, she said, keeping her voice professional. "I have confirmed enemy firing position. Structure shows no civilian activity at this time. Friendlies remain fixed. Recommend immediate. Type 1, danger close. Guns." "Recommendation denied," Command said at once. "You do not have ISR confirmation. You will hold. Ground must maneuver." But ground couldn't maneuver, and Command knew it. It was the kind of answer you gave when you needed to stay clean, not when you needed to win. Maya looked westward, toward nothing, letting the silence stretch in the cockpit. She could hear her own breathing. Outside, the desert was sliding toward dark. Inside, the moral math was done. If she did what Command wanted, she would trade lives she could have saved for the health of her file. She thumbed to the JTAC instead. "Razor 3, Hog. I have target. If I get push, this will be short and accurate." The relief in his reply was naked. "Copy, Hog. We're ready. We're hurting." She banked, setting herself up not for another dry look, but for the line she knew the GAU-8 would want. Shallow enough to keep the beaten zone tight, offset enough not to clip the structure. In her HUD, the Wadi framed itself, the Pipper waiting. On the command net, voices were starting to harden. 2-1, confirm master arm safe. Say again, safe. Maya breathed out slowly. 2-1, standing by, she said, buying seconds. She didn't safe it. Instead, she built the picture in her head, every second of it, so that when she finally chose, and she knew now she would choose, it would not be blind, or impulsive, or reckless. It would be the only line that made sense to someone who was actually there. Below, gunfire continued. Someone screamed. Then even the command net couldn't drown out the truth coming up from the valley. In the next pass, she was going to stop it. Years before the desert wadi and the tightening ROE, Maya had been a brand new captain in a colder, more mountainous theater. The airbase was tucked against brown ridges, and the villages below were scattered like loose stones. Back then, she still believed that if you did everything right, the system would too. She remembered the smell of that day. Dry dust, JP-8, a faint sweetness from a nearby burn pit. She and her flight lead, Hunter, had launched on what was supposed to be a simple show of presence over a restive valley. Nothing fancy. Just let them hear jets overhead. Let the ground patrol know air was watching. Halfway through the orbit, the calm devolved. Anycast, this is Panther 2-1. Troops in contact, grid. The ground call stumbled, correcting itself, breathless. Receiving effective fire from treeline north. Taking casualties, need immediate CAS. Maya had snapped her head to the radio panel. That was close. Only a few minutes' flight from where they were. She keyed up. Panther, this is Viper 2-2, A-10 on station nearby. Say your position again. But before the JTAC could repeat, the control authority came in like a wall. Viper flight, this is Sword Control. Hold current orbit. Airspace below 10,000 is red for deconfliction. Await killbox activation. Maya blinked. Sword, Viper 2-2, ground is receiving effective fire, requesting immediate clearance to descend. Negative 2-2, rotary inbound, ISR establishing. We will open the box when we have full picture. Maintain. Down on the dirt, the JTAC was trying to juggle his own chaos. Viper, we have one urgent, we are pinned. Gunfire cracked through his mic, a violent popping. Request guns, immediate. Maya looked over at Hunter. He was older, steady, eyes on his displays. We hold, he said quietly on flight. They haven't opened the box. They're getting hit. I know. She wanted to say, then let's fix it. Instead, she turned back to Sword. Control, any timeline on the box? Stand by 2-2. Stand by. The phrase that filled the space where help should have been. Below, the terrain was working against the patrol. Narrow draw, tree line masking the shooters. It was practically designed for hog intervention. Maya pictured diving in, rolling out, a clean 30mm burst right over the tree line. She had the fuel, the angle, the aircraft. What she didn't have was permission. Panther, status? She asked, unable to keep the urgency out of her voice. Still in contact. One man not moving, trying to pull him. This is bad, Viper. Her hands tightened on the stick even though she was at altitude, circling like a kite on a string. Hunter's voice came through again, low. Don't break altitude, Rios. Not today. She bit down on what she wanted to say. That altitude was meaningless if people died under it. That no one was going to put excellent adherence to deconfliction on a folded flag. But she was junior then, and the habits of obedience were still fresh. The minutes stretched obscenely. ISR finally checked on, late. Rotary was still a ways out. Sword Control finally said, Killbox active, QES cleared for Panther engagement. Viper, descend to... The JTAC's voice cut across it, hoarse, ragged. Contact decreasing, moving off. A pause. We lost one. We're exfilling. Maya felt it like a blow. The box opened right as the need was closing. It was like watching a door finally swing wide to an empty hallway. Sword, Viper 2? 2, do you still require us on task? Negative 2-2. Panther is breaking contact. Remain at altitude. Remain at altitude. She stared down at the valley. Quiet now, the rifle fire gone, just a smear of dust where men had run under bullets. She imagined the wounded man, the one who wasn't moving. She imagined his team trying to drag him without overhead fire to cover them. She imagined the sound in their voices when they realized the jets had been there, listening, and done nothing. After landing, she'd gone straight to debrief, jaw tight. Hunter had been sympathetic but firm. That was the right call, he said. We can't start punching down through red airspace every time somebody on the ground gets in trouble. That's how mid-airs happen. That's how civilians get hit. She had nodded because she knew the logic. But later that night she'd found the JTAC on a shared channel replaying the contact for his report. You could hear it clearly. The moment where aggression became desperation. The moment where he said, need immediate CAS. And the sky said, stand by. Maya muted her mic and sat in the dark of her quarters, listening to it twice. She told herself, next time I am close enough to stop that from happening, I am going to stop it, even if I have to argue on the radio while I'm doing it. That vow never left. It went into her notebook, into the way she pre-briefed, into the way she got too invested. It was why, years later over Wadi Midian, she had so little patience for a clean answer from a faraway voice. The last time she waitingly obeyed, A man didn't go home. Back in the present, with the enemy gun still chewing up the east wall, Maya's hands were steadier than they had been in that old mountain orbit. This time, she wasn't the junior wingman. This time, the jet was hers. The picture was hers, and the cost of inaction was clearly in her headset. This time, she wasn't going to let stand by be the last thing they heard. The desert below was almost fully in shadow now. The wadi a black seam with flashes stitched along one side. Maya could tell from the cadence of the gun that the enemy was getting comfortable. Short bursts, then longer, like they had realized no one was shutting them up. A-10C came back, clipped and strained. "Hog, they're shifting fire down the line. We can't move casualties. This is getting bad." On the higher net, the calm, distant voice returned. "Hog 2-1, confirm you remain non-kinetic. You are to maintain altitude and hold." She could have echoed it back, nice and obedient. Instead, she eased the nose down. "Ranger 3, Hog. I'm going to make a low pass to get you an exact talk on. Stay down, stay off the east wall." There was gratitude in his answer, even through the gunfire. "Do it, Hog. We're all down." She flicked her eyes to the armament panel. Master Arms stayed it safe. That was her fig leaf. If they pulled tapes later, she could say she did exactly what she was cleared to do. Look. It didn't mean the pass had to be gentle. She rolled left, letting the Hog settle into a descending turn toward the mouth of the wadi. Terrain rose up, the walls narrowing, the sky shrinking to a strip above the canopy. Her engines throbbed against the heat rising from the rocks. This was lower than command wanted her, lower than was polite when people with PKMs were looking up, but it was the height where truth lived. 2-2, offset 500 west, keep your altitude, she said. If they start shooting at me, mark the source. Her wingman didn't hide the concern. You're getting awfully low for a non-kinetic fable. Yeah, she said, eyes narrowed on the target area. Because non-kinetic isn't what they need. She crossed over the green smoke, now barely visible, and the east wall sprang into sharp detail. The adobe-like structure that had spooked HQ sat inert, edges chipped, no heat, no movement. 5, maybe 6 meters south of it, tucked behind a low rise, was the MG position. 2 men, one firing, one feeding. They'd dragged up extra ammo boxes. That meant they planned to stay. Ranger 3, from your green, target is east, 10 meters south of the single structure on the shelf. 2-man MG team. That is your enemy, she said, voice tight but clear. Copy, east 10 from structure, shelf, MG. He shot back. His own voice steadied. Someone was finally describing the same battlefield he was seeing. Tracer leapt up at her, wild and hopeful. She jinked slightly, wings rocking, but kept the nose pointed so she wouldn't lose the sight line. Her HUD drew the wadi in thin green lines. This was the exact line she would need for guns. On the command net. Heat. Hog 2-1. You are below directed altitude. Climb immediately. Acknowledge. Command 2-1. Conducting non-kinetic pass to confirm enemy away from structure for JTAC. Climbing in 5. She didn't climb in 5. She took one more second, one more heartbeat-long look, then powered up and pulled, feeling the G press her down as the Hog clawed back up the valley. She came out on top of the wadi again, with the picture burned into her mind. There was no family in that house. There was only a gun using it as a shield against people who, right now, were bleeding under her. Ranger, you good on that talk-on? She asked. Perfect, Hog. That's exactly it. If you put anything there, we live. That sentence went straight into her chest. If you put anything there, we live. Hog 2-1, command repeated sharper. You will maintain altitude and await ISR. Your last pass was not in accordance with guidance. You will not descend again. She leveled, but only because she wanted to, not because they'd won. 2-2, she called to her wingman. I have exact target. If I go in on the next one, you stay high and call shots. Are we cleared to go in? He asked, incredulous. Not yet. What she didn't say was that sometimes clearance didn't come before necessity. Sometimes clearance arrived afterward, dressed up as justification, because someone brave had made it impossible to call the act wrong. Below, the gun started again, angrier now, maybe because they'd seen her pass and understood what it meant. Dust kicked up around the pinned platoon. Someone shouted for a medic. The wadi was running out of minutes. Maya looked down through the canopy at the exact corner of Earth she now knew she could erase with a 2-second burst. Now she knew where to shoot. Next pass, she would. The wadi had narrowed into a single merciless equation. On one side, a gun, a bad angle, and a structure command was afraid of. On the other, a platoon flat on the rock, bleeding, out of room. And above them, in the thin, darkening air, an A-10C with everything it needed to make the problem go away, except permission. Hog 2-1, the command voice said, harder now. You will maintain altitude. ISR is 5 mics out. You will not expend. Say again, you will not expend. 5 minutes. They were asking her to let men die for 5 minutes of video. Down below, the JTAC broke all radio polish. Hog, this is it. They're trying to flank. If you don't hit that gun, I'm going to lose them. Danger close authorized on my authority. Send it. There it was. The authority that mattered to her. The one lying on his belly in the dirt. Not the one sitting under air conditioning. Maya's breathing slowed. She checked herself the way instructors had drilled into her. Altitude, airspeed, weapons page, master arm. She flicked master arm to arm with a soft, decisive motion. The panel glowed back at her. Honest. This was no longer a rehearsal. 2-2, she said. I am going in. Stay high, call impacts, and if they light me up from another position, you mark it. Her wingman didn't argue this time. Maybe he heard the ground, too. Copy, Fable, you're cleared hot from me. Not from command, but from the only people it mattered to. She rolled the hog into her run. The desert tilted, the wadi sliding up the HUD. This was where the A-10C felt closest to what it had been built for. Nose down, fat gun in line, airframe humming with purpose. The GAU-8's pipper settled just off the structure, right over the low shelf where the MG team lay. She built in a tiny offset to keep the beaten zone away from the wall. She could do this. She'd done harder. Ranger 3, hog, in hot guns, she called, voice steady. Cleared hot, danger close, send it. On the command net, panic. 2-1, abort, this is an unlawful. She squeezed. The GAU-8 didn't bark so much as it tore a hole in the evening. The whole jet shuddered with the recoil, a deep-throated brr-brr-brr-brr that she felt through her harness. A stream of 30mm slugs stitched down the eastern shelf exactly where she'd pictured it, sparks and dust blooming in a tight, controlled fan. The muzzle smoke trailed past the canopy, acrid and familiar. She eased off after 2 seconds, no more than she needed. The wadi erupted in dust, a rolling tan cloud that washed over the structure and the gun. She pulled up, engines straining, climbing back out of small arms range. For a second, no one said anything. Then the ground exploded in relief. Good effects! Good effects! The JTAC shouted, the pitch of his voice changing in an instant. Gun is down! Say again, gun is down! Friendly's holding! Oh, that was beautiful! Another voice on the ground, breathless, not meant for radio. They got it! They got the gun! Maya let out a breath she hadn't noticed she was holding. Her hands were still on the stick and throttle, but the tremor that had been there earlier was gone. She'd chosen. The world had not ended. Men were alive who wouldn't have been. On the command net, the calm was gone. Hog 2-1, you have violated a direct theater order. You will RTB immediately for debrief. You will safe all weapons and report to Ops. Acknowledge. She leveled, letting the A-10C settle into a climbing turn to the west. Command 2-1, guns complete, target neutralized, friendlies fixed but stable. RTBing Al Rayan. You will state for the record that you heard the abort. I heard the abort, she said, and didn't try to dodge it. I also heard imminent friendly loss. There was only static after that, the kind that meant people were talking on their end with mics up. She switched back to the JTAC. Ranger, Hog, Sitrep? Still in contact, but they're shooting blind now. We can break their line, move casualties. You saved us, Hog. I mean that. She felt that like a hand on her shoulder. Copy, Razor. Get your people out. Above her, 2-2 exhaled. Well, he said, I guess we're all going to have some interesting paperwork. Yeah, Maya said, watching the wadi slide behind them into darkness. But they're going home. And that, more than her flight hours, more than the line on her OPR, was the thing she'd written in her notebook years ago. If I can hear them, I don't leave them. Today she hadn't. Now she just had to survive the people who wished she had. The flight back to Al Rayan should have been a victory lap, but the frequency traffic told her it wouldn't be. Approach control was unusually formal, and there was an extra voice on the net, base ops, asking for her ETA to the minute. That meant people were already assembling. Al Rayan approach, Hog 2-1, 10 miles out, full stop, code 3 for debrief, Maya called. Hog 2-1, cleared to land runway 27, Ops requests you taxi straight to squadron on arrival, came the reply. No banter, no nice work, just business. She safed everything, master arm cold, remaining ordnance checked in place, then brought the Hog down on the runway, tires kissing concrete in the orange wash of airfield lights. As she rolled out, she let herself glance once to the east, to where the wadi lay in darkness. Somewhere out there, men were wrapping tourniquets and collecting brass instead of writing letters to families. That was the only part of tonight that was simple. Her crew chief met her at the chocks, headset on. He could read her face, or maybe he'd heard the command net. Ma'am, he said quietly, they're waiting inside? Copy. We'll do the download first, she said, popping the canopy. I want my tapes pulled immediately. Intel hated when pilots got ahead of them, but she needed the audio. The truth had to exist somewhere besides her head. She climbed down, helmet under arm, and walked fast toward the squadron building. Inside, the air conditioning hit her, cold, dry, indifferent. Ops was already gathered. Lieutenant Cole Stroud, her CO, Keegan, her flight lead, and an intel captain with a laptop open, cables ready. Stroud's expression was tight, not furious yet, but alert. The look of a man who'd been called by hire and didn't like what he'd heard. Rios, Stroud said, we're doing a hot wash right now. Intel needs your HUD and audio. Understood, sir. I also need the JTAC audio included in the packet. He gave me danger close on his authority. That'll be included if it's on the net we recorded, the intel captain said, already reaching for her data cartridge. Seat video too. She handed it over. It is, and it matters. Stroud gestured to the briefing room. Let's go. They sat. The room still smelled like coffee from the earlier ROE brief, which made the day feel like it had come full circle in a cruel way. Stroud didn't bother with small talk. I already have theater on me about an unauthorized engagement near a flagged structure, he said. So I'm going to ask plainly, did you hear the abort? Yes, sir, Maya said. No point lying. I heard the abort. And you fired anyway? Yes, sir, based on imminent friendly loss. JTAC was fixed, unable to maneuver, taking sustained MG fire danger close. I had positive visual on the enemy gun separate from the structure. Stroud exhaled through his nose, not quite a sigh. You know how this looks to them. I know how it looked to me, she said, and to the people who were down there. The intel captain glanced up. Ma'am, when you say separate from the structure, did you observe any civilian pattern of life indicators? Lights, personnel, vehicles? Negative. Multiple passes, no movement, no heat signatures inside windows I could see. MG was about 10 meters south on a shelf. I offset the run to keep the beaten zone off the wall. That's good for the record, Intel said, typing fast. Keegan finally spoke up from the side, voice more resigned than angry. You were told to stay non-kinetic. I was told to stay non-kinetic while a unit was telling me they were going to lose people, Maya said, keeping her tone even. Sir, we have the JTAC on audio saying, if you don't hit that gun, I'm going to lose them. If that doesn't meet imminent friendly loss, I don't know what does. Stroud rubbed his temple. Theater's going to parse it differently. They'll say ISR was 5 minutes out. You could have held. 5 minutes is a long time when you can't move. Maya cut in before she could stop herself. Sir. He fixed her with a look, not furious, but warning. You're right, but I need you to understand. I don't get to tell theater how to feel about their ROE. They've already asked for a copy of your tapes and your cockpit audio. This is going up. Then it needs to go up with the ground audio too, she said. I want their voices in that packet. I want their description of the ambush, and of the MG, and of the fact that they authorized danger close. The intel captain hesitated. That complicates the narrative. It clarifies the reality, Maya said. They were there. Stroud tapped the table once, making the decision. Include the ground net, he told Intel. If we're going to get grilled, we're getting grilled with the whole fight. He turned back to Maya. Here's what happens now. You write your initial aircrew statement while it's fresh. You note the abort order, you note your observations, you note the JTAC's imminent loss call, and you note that you adjusted your run to mitigate collateral. Do not get poetic. Do not editorialize. Stick to facts. Yes, sir. And Rios? He paused, choosing his words. You put me in a spot. I can defend your judgment if I can show you had the information you say you had. If Intel pulls those tapes and there's any doubt, that structure was occupied, this gets ugly. She met his eyes. I know what I saw. Keegan's shoulders dropped a fraction. Hell of a shot, though, he muttered, almost too low to hear. They're all alive? JTAC said they could move casualties after my pass, Maya said. So yes, they're alive. That quieted the room for a beat. Even Intel, who lived in slides and feeds, understood what that meant. Stroud nodded once, as if conceding that reality matters. All right. Theater has already signaled an investigation. It's not a court-martial yet, but it's not going away. Get your statement done now. We'll push the packet within the hour." She took the form, pen poised. This was the second half of the mission, the part where you fought not for air supremacy, but for the truth of what you'd done. If she wrote it small, she might save herself and lose the why. If she wrote it honest, she might hand them the rope they wanted. She started with the only line she could live with. At time of engagement, friendly ground forces were pinned and unable to maneuver, and the JTAC transmitted imminent loss of friendly life. Outside, the desert runway hummed. Inside, the investigation had already begun. They didn't wait a day. By the next morning, Maya was sitting in a small conference room that always smelled faintly of toner, with a carafe of coffee no one was drinking. The blinds were half closed against the desert glare. Across from her sat an intel major she didn't know, in flightless OCPs, with her HUD tape paused on a frame that showed the wadi in stark green lines. Next to him was a JAG captain with a tablet full of ROE excerpts. At the end of the table, Stroud had planted himself like a reluctant sponsor. The intel major tapped the screen. "This is your second low pass," he said. "Timestamp 1942 local. At this point, theater had already issued an abort and instructed you to hold for ISR, correct?" "Yes," Maya said. "And you descended anyway." "I descended to confirm that the enemy firing position was separate from the structure, and to give the JTAC a precise talk-on. That's permitted as a non-kinetic action to support ground." The JAG captain looked up. "Captain Rios, did you state in hot guns on the subsequent pass?" "Yes." "And at that time, had you received clearance to fire from the theater command net?" "No." JAG nodded slowly, as if checking boxes. "So the essential facts aren't in dispute." Stroud cleared his throat. "What's in dispute is whether her decision fell under the imminent loss of friendly life provision, which gives the on-scene commander, in this case the on-scene air crew, discretion to act." The intel major swiveled the screen so everyone could see. He'd split the audio. On the left, the theater's calm abort order. On the right, the JTAC's voice fraying. He played them back to back. "Hog 2-1, you will hold fires. If you don't hit that gun, I'm gonna lose them. Danger close on my authority. Send it." He stopped the tape. "You see our problem," he said, not unkindly. "You had conflicting authorities." Maya sat forward. "No, sir. I had one authority that was looking at a screen and trying to stay clean, and one authority that was lying on the ground in the kill zone. Only one of those had bodies at risk in the next 30 seconds. JAG scrolled his tablet. "The ROE is very clear that danger close from a JTAC does not automatically negate theater aborts when a protected structure is involved." "The structure was empty," Maya said. "Multiple passes, no movement, no heat, no civilians fleeing gunfire. The enemy was 10 meters south using it as cover. I offset the run to keep the beaten zone off the wall." "ISR had not confirmed that," the intel major said. "ISR had left," Maya shot back. "I was the only sensor over the target. At that moment, I was ISR." That made both officers pause. It was true, and it was also inconvenient. Stroud seized it. "That's the crux," he said. "She wasn't freelancing out of adrenaline. She had on-scene SA that Hire didn't have, and she had a JTAC who invoked imminent loss. She made a call." JAG drummed his fingers. "You understand why theater is antsy, Captain. We just had a civilian-sensitive near miss in the area. They tightened ROE. Then you go in guns near a flagged structure." "I also understand," Maya said, keeping her voice from rising, "that if I'd orbited for 5 minutes waiting for ISR, you'd be reading a KIA list from that platoon right now. That should be in the record, too." The intel major tapped his screen again. We will need to corroborate the ground picture. Right now, we have your assertion and the audio tone of a stressed JTAC. We do not have the patrol leader's statement, casualty reports, or BDA from the ground. Until we do, this looks like an aircrew choosing to ignore theater. Then pull the ground statements, Maya said. Get Razor 3, get the platoon leader. They will tell you that gun was killing them. That's the plan, Jag said. Hire has already requested ground testimonies. This will go into a formal inquiry packet. There it was, the word formal. Stroud looked at her, and she could read the worry behind the professional mask. This wasn't going to be quietly handled at squadron level. Jag softened his tone a degree. Captain Rios, nobody here thinks you were joyriding, but theater has to send a message about ROE adherence. They cannot have pilots deciding, individually, that aborts are optional. Maya met his eyes. Sir, with respect, yesterday the theater had a choice too. They could have trusted the person who was actually over the target and hearing men die. They chose not to. I made a different choice. The intel major actually smiled, just a little. Well, he said, let's hear what the men on the ground have to say. He closed the laptop. We'll convene again after we have their statements. As they stood, Stroud hung back with her. You did well in there, he murmured. You didn't get defensive. I was defensive, she said quietly. I just had better words. You're not out of the woods, he warned. If the ground reports come back messy, they'll default to the cleanest villain. And right now, that's the pilot who ignored the abort. Then we better get their voices on record fast, she said. Already requested. It wasn't over. It was just leaving the air and going to the dirt. If the soldiers she'd saved could tell it straight, she had a fighting chance. If they couldn't, theater would write the story without her. The call came in mid-afternoon, when the desert light was white and flat. Maya was at her desk trying to pretend she cared about a maintenance note when Stroud knocked and stuck his head in. They got the ground statements, he said. You should hear them. He led her back to Intel, where the same major from the review had set up an audio file on the big screen. A waveform pulsed across it, jagged, loud, full of gunfire ghosts. The major folded his arms. Context, he said. Platoon had just exfilled to a casualty collection point. JTAC recorded his own statement right after. Squad leader added his a bit later. You'll hear both. Just remember, they're not trying to make your life easier. They're just telling it like it was. Good, Maya said. That's what I want. He hit play. The first voice was the JTAC, Razor 3, still breathing hard. You could hear people moving around him, medics talking in the background. Statement for TIC, Wadi Midian, he began, trying to sound official but lapsing into the cadence of a man who'd almost died. We entered the Wadi at approximately 1935 local, took effective MG fire from Eastern Shelf within 10 meters of what looked like an abandoned structure. Fire was accurate and sustained. We attempted to maneuver west, but enemy was in a position of advantage and was walking rounds along the wall. I assessed we were fixed and unable to maneuver without additional casualties. He swallowed. The mic crackled. I had limited marking, green smoke, single LTD, and terrain masked me after first bend. ISR departed. Repeat. ISR departed, leaving A-10C Hog 2-1 as the only overhead with eyes on. Theater command issued abort due to proximity of structure. I assessed that if Hogji complied, I was going to lose personnel. I communicated imminent friendly loss and authorized danger close on my authority. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had a quiver. Not weakness, just the memory of fear. Hog 2, 1 conducted a low pass, identified the gun, and then engaged with guns. Effects were immediate and accurate. Enemy gun was silenced. That engagement allowed us to move our casualties and break the fix. Without that engagement at that time, I believe I would have lost at least one more man. The intel major glanced at her. That line would matter. He skipped ahead. Squad leader now. A new voice came on, rougher, less concerned with paper. Staff Sergeant Malik Ortiz, 2nd Platoon, Bravo, he said. We were pinned. Every time we put a head up, we got dusted. My medic was working on Specialist Keen, and rounds were hitting the rock next to him. We were not moving without someone killing that gun. We heard Hire telling the pilot to hold. I remember thinking, well, that's it. We're on our own. Then she came in anyway. There was a clatter, like he'd shifted his gear while talking. I saw the tracers come down on the shelf. I saw the PKM stop. After that, we could drag Keen. So whoever's listening to this, you need to know. We were dead until she ignored you. The room went very quiet. On the recording, Ortiz kept going, less formal now, talking to someone he couldn't see. I get rules. I get civilians. But nobody was walking along that wall with a bucket of water, you know? It was just dudes trying to kill us. Pilot saw that. She did what she was supposed to do. The intel major hit stop. The waveform froze. That last sentence, Stroud said slowly. We're definitely including that. The major nodded. It's in the packet. Maya sat back, letting it wash over her. Hearing it from them, raw, sweaty, half-swearing, was different from imagining it in the cockpit. She had heard their terror over the radio. Now she heard the after. It made her both lighter and heavier. That's not all, the major said. Platoon leader's statement is a little messier. He mixes the timeline, says ISR was still there when you fired, which it wasn't. But the core is the same. They couldn't move. You killed the gun. They moved. Will theater latch on to the messy parts? Maya asked. Of course they will, the major said. They'll say, see? Ground didn't have a perfect picture either. But those 2 lines, I was going to lose personnel and we were dead until she ignored you. Those are strong. It makes it politically harder to hammer you. Stroud looked at her with the faintest of relief. This is what we needed, he said. You didn't make up the urgency. I told you I didn't, Maya said, but there was no gloat in it, only tiredness. How bad was Keen? Stabilized, Stroud said. Evac'd. Surgeon said getting him out of the beaten zone when you did made the difference. Maya exhaled through her nose. That was the part she hadn't let herself dwell on. That there was a man lying on a table right now, because she'd disobeyed someone who had never felt a bullet kick dust over their face. So what now? She asked. Now, said the intel major, your case goes from pilot ignored ROE to pilot exercised judgment under imminent friendly loss. That's still going to make HQ twitch, but it's harder to punish you without punishing the narrative that we save our people. Stroud gave a half shrug. Doesn't mean there won't be consequences. It just means they can't make you the villain cleanly. Maya nodded. She could live with not being cleanly anything. She could live with complicated, with footnotes, with within commander's discretion. What she couldn't have lived with was Ortiz's voice saying, we were dead, and knowing she'd orbited. She stood. Send me the transcript? She asked. Unofficially, yeah, the major said. Officially, you never saw it. Officially, she said, picking up her helmet from the chair. I was just doing my job. The thing about doing something loud in combat is that it never stays inside the cockpit. By the next day, the squadron knew. You could tell by the way conversations stopped when Maya walked into life support, by how a couple of junior pilots stared at her A-10 parked on the line like it was a crime scene and a legend at the same time. She was checking her gear when Lilte Bunker Hale, 2 deployments, good stick, very by the book, said, a little too casually, "So that's how we're doing KS now? We just ignore theater?" The room got very interested in zippers and gloves. Maya kept folding her gloves. "That's how we're doing CAS when a JTAC says he's going to lose people and we're the only ones overhead," she said. Bunker scoffed. "Yeah, well, some of us would like to keep flying. Some of us would like the guys on the ground to keep living," she said, then bit back the rest. She wasn't here to win a locker room debate. From the doorway, Keegan cut in. "Enough." His tone said this wasn't for the whole squadron. "Rios, CO wants you." She followed him to Stroud's office. He closed the door behind them, shutting out the low murmur of pilots arguing about a mission they hadn't flown. Stroud was at his desk, sleeves rolled, a stack of emails on his screen. He waved her to the chair, leaned back, and let out a slow breath. "You've successfully split my squadron," he said, not angry, just stating it. "Half of them think you're a hero. Half of them think you're going to get us all slapped with tighter controls." "I didn't tell anyone to copy me," Maya said. "I made a call on a bad night." "Doesn't matter," Stroud said. "They saw it, and it plays right into every bias people already have about female pilots being emotional." She went still. "That wasn't an emotional call." "I know that," he said quickly. "I watched your tapes. I read the JTAC. You built SA, you made an offset, you did it clean. But people don't always see what we see in ops. They see headlines. Pilot ignores abort. And they forget the part where a platoon lived." He steepled his fingers. "I need you to help me tamp this down." "How?" she asked. "By pretending I regret it?" "By talking about process, not heroics," he said. "By telling the flight room that you made that call only because you had on-scene SA and a JTAC declaring imminent loss. That this is not a license to go rogue. If you frame it as, 'I did what was right,' half of them will hear, 'Your orders don't matter.'" That was the dilemma laid bare. If she owned her moral choice too hard, she'd feed every ops officer's nightmare. If she softened it, she'd make it sound like it could have gone either way, like maybe the platoon could have died, and that would have been acceptable. She looked Stroud in the eye. "Sir, I can tell them it was specific, time-sensitive, and JTAC-driven. I can tell them I had positive visual the structure was empty. But I won't tell them I should have let those guys die." "Good," Stroud said. "Don't. I'm not asking you to lie." He glanced at the door, then lowered his voice. "Off the record, I'd have done it too." The words hit harder than she expected. "You would?" He shrugged one shoulder. "Pinned friendlies, empty structure, no ISR, JTAC screaming?" "Yeah, I'd have done it. Difference is, I'm wearing the bird, and I've already had my career conversations. You're still in the part where people decide what you get to fly. That's why I can't say that in front of the inquiry." So she wasn't crazy. She wasn't reckless. She was just earlier in her career than he was in his. "Bunker and a couple others are going to stay salty," Stroud went on. "Because now Hire's asking for our SOP on theater overrides. They want to see if we encouraged independent action. We didn't, but they're looking." "So I made you a target," Maya said. "You made us visible," Stroud corrected. "There's a difference. We fly CAS. If we never bend, people die. If we bend too much, they ground us. We live in that middle. I just need you not to make bending look glamorous. A knock sounded. Keegan stuck his head in. Sorry, boss. Theater sent another note. Says formal decision pending. They want to message ROE discipline to coalition. Stroud grimaced. Told you, he said to Maya. This is above us now. Keegan lingered. For what it's worth, he said to her. The JTAC emailed the squadron. He said, your pilot saved my guys. That went around. Maya felt warmth and exposure at the same time. So everyone's seen it. Everyone's seen it, Keegan said, which means everyone's got an opinion. After he left, Stroud looked at her again, softer. Listen, you did the thing we tell ourselves we'll do when it's bad. You actually did it. That matters. But from here on, every sortie you fly is going to be watched. So you fly perfect. You show them this was judgment, not impulse. I can do that, she said. I know. That's why I'm fighting for you. She stood to go, hand on the doorknob, when Stroud added, and Rios? Whatever they say up top, the people you saved already cast their vote. Don't let HQ overwrite that in your own head. She nodded and stepped back into the hallway. The pilots out there still looked up when she passed, some with respect, some with annoyance, some with pure curiosity. Let them look, she thought. Let them wonder if they would have done it. She'd heard men say, we were dead until she ignored you. That was the part she was keeping. The rest, memos, SOP tweaks, side eyes in the ready room, was just the cost of doing CAS the way it was meant to be done. They didn't call it a trial. They called it a theater-level coordination, which was the sort of phrase that meant colonels and full birds were talking in rooms with better coffee than hers. Maya wasn't invited. She was told to be available. So she sat in the squadron, flying a desk, while her name and her HUD tape moved across inboxes in a building miles away. Stroud went to one of the VTCs. When he came back, his jaw was tight. They're jumpy, he said, dropping into the chair across from her. They want to remind everybody that ROE exists for a reason. Do they want to remind everybody that the platoon exists too? She asked. They heard the ground audio, he said. They can't unhear it. That's the only reason this isn't already punitive. He slid a printed sheet toward her, an excerpt from a draft Frago. The language was classic HQ. In instances of imminent friendly loss where on-scene commander possesses superior situational awareness, deviation from ROE must be justified with sensor data and ground force reporting. They're rewriting it because of me? Maya asked. They're rewriting it because of you, Stroud said. They want the option to say, we allow discretion, without saying, sure, ignore us whenever you want. She read the paragraph again. It was essentially what she had done. I saw, I heard, I acted, and I can prove it. If that became the standard, fewer pilots would have to choose between career and conscience. That was something. Later that day, she was summoned to a smaller room. Just Stroud, a colonel from the air component on a monitor, and a staff JAG who looked like he'd slept in his uniform. The colonel's backdrop was a bland gray HQ wall with a theater map behind him. Captain Rios, the colonel said, voice even. We've reviewed your tapes, the command net, the JTAC and squad leader statements, and BDA from the ground. I want to speak plainly so we don't waste time. Yes, sir, she said. First, BDA confirms no civilian casualties, no damage to inhabited structures, and precise effects on the enemy firing position. He glanced down, reading. You offset your run. That's noted as positive. Maya didn't let herself smile, but a knot loosened behind her sternum. That had been the one thing she couldn't prove with words alone. Second, the colonel went on, the JTAC's call, "I'm gonna lose them," meets the spirit of imminent friendly loss. That puts your decision in a different box than simple non-compliance. The staff JAG added, "It does not erase the fact that you heard and acknowledged the abort." "I understand, sir," Maya said. "What we have here," the colonel said, "is a tension between centralized risk aversion and decentralized reality. Theater had a recent incident and wanted to slow everyone down. You were in a position where slowing down meant watching friendlies die. You chose to act. From a flying standpoint, it was disciplined. From a messaging standpoint." He spread his hands. "We have to be careful." There it was, the word she'd been waiting for. Messaging. This wasn't only about right and wrong. It was about what they needed to show partner forces, capitals, news feeds. "So here's what we're going to do," the colonel said. "We will not pursue punitive action at this time. We will issue a formal memorandum for record noting that you engaged after an abort under an imminent friendly loss assessment based on on-scene SA and ground authorization. That memo will live with the mission file. We will also update the Frago to clarify that such discretion is narrow and must be supported by data." Stroud relaxed visibly. Maya kept her back straight. "Understood, sir. This does not give you or your squadron license to treat theater aborts as suggestions," the colonel added, eyes flicking to Stroud. "But it does acknowledge that you weren't joyriding with a gun. You saved people." "Thank you, sir," Maya said. He nodded once. "For what it's worth, and this is off the record, I'd rather have a pilot who sweats over the people on the ground than one who's indifferent. We just have to make sure the system doesn't look capricious." The screen clicked off. The room seemed to exhale. Jag gathered his things. "You'll get the formal ruling in writing," he said. "Until then, don't talk to anyone outside your chain about this." When he left, it was just her and Stroud. "You're not cleared clean," he said, "but you're not getting hammered." "That's fair," she said, tasting the word. It wasn't victory, but it wasn't betrayal either. "Fair's about all you get at this level," Stroud said. "They couldn't pretend the platoon didn't praise you. They couldn't pretend you hit civilians. So they did what HQs do. They wrote a paragraph." She let herself lean back. The weight she'd been carrying since the gun run shifted, smaller now. She'd still have a memo somewhere with her name and the words, "after abort." But it would be next to "imminent friendly loss" and "no civilian damage." She could live with that. Outside, the ramp was hot and loud, jets cycling. She could see her A-10 from the window, squat and patient. She thought of the next pilot who'd get a desperate JTAC and a nervous HQ on the same mission. Maybe, because of today's meetings, that pilot would have a line in the Frago to point to. Maybe they wouldn't have to gamble quite as hard. The email came just after noon, when the ops floor was quiet, and the worst heat had driven people into corners with paperwork. It was addressed to her, CC'd to Stroud, the group commander, and 2 HQ addresses she didn't recognize. Subject line: Results of Theater Engagement Review, Ref 06 Nov, Wadi Midian. Stroud must have gotten it at the same time because he stepped out of his office and jerked his chin toward the briefing room. "Let's read it together." She followed him in. He closed the door, and for a moment, they just stood over the screen like two people about to open medical results. Stroud nodded. "Go ahead." She opened it. The language was exactly what she expected. Measured, cautious, allergic to adjectives. Following review of all available mission data, including aircrew recordings, command net traffic, forward ground force statements, and battle damage assessment, she read aloud. This headquarters assesses that Captain Maya Rios, call sign Hawag-21, executed a close air support engagement in proximity to a flagged structure after receipt of a theater-level abort directive. She glanced up. Stroud's face said, "Keep going." In accordance with ROE Para 7.A3, aircrew are authorized to deviate from a higher directive when, in their on-scene judgment, imminent loss of friendly life is reasonably assessed and no other mitigating fires are available. Maya felt something unclench in her chest. Theater acknowledges that 1. Friendly ground forces were fixed and unable to maneuver. 2. JTAC on scene transmitted imminent friendly loss and authorized danger close employment. 3. Aircrew demonstrated positive visual discrimination of enemy firing position offset from structure. And 4. No civilian casualties or damage to inhabited structures occurred. There. Every piece she'd fought to get into the record, in black and white. She kept reading. This headquarters further assesses that earlier compliance with the abort could have resulted in additional friendly casualties. Therefore, punitive action is not warranted. Stroud let out a quiet, "Good." She wasn't done. However, she read, this incident highlights the necessity of clear, timely ISR support and unambiguous ROE guidance to aircrews executing CAS in complex terrain. A memorandum for record will be placed with the mission file to document the deviation and the rationale. She scrolled to the signature block. Colonel, Air Component. Concurrence from JAG. "That's it," Stroud said. "No LOC, no Article 15. Maya set her hands on the table, breathing out slowly. "So I keep flying." "You keep flying," he said. "There'll be some eyes on your next few sorties, but yeah, you're good." She sat back, looking at the email again. The part of her that wanted clean justice thought, why couldn't they just say, "She did the right thing"? Why did it have to be wrapped in reasonably assessed and not warranted and highlights the necessity? But the pilot part of her, the part that had second-guessed every inch of that run, was satisfied. The 3 facts that mattered most were in there: imminent friendly loss, visual discrimination, no civilian damage. Anyone who read her record later would see those. They'd see that she'd been in a bad spot and made it work. Stroud leaned on the table watching her. "You okay?" "Yeah," she said. Then, because he'd earned the candid answer, "I'm tired." He chuckled. "Yeah, that happens when you fight the war and the staff at the same time." She looked out the small window. The flight line was shimmering. Her A-10 sat in its spot, ordinary again. Just another jet. "Sir," she said, "what happens to the ROE now?" "They pushed the frago we saw," he said. "Adds a paragraph for your situation. We brief it. We tell people, you can do what she did, but you better be right." "That's fair," she said. He straightened. "I'll let the room know you're cleared. Some of them will pretend they knew it all along." "Let them," she said, smiling faintly. As she left the briefing room, a couple of pilots looked up from their tablets. Word traveled fast. Keegan grinned at her from across the hall and gave a small thumbs up. Even Bunker, who'd given her grief, looked more curious than hostile, like he was recalibrating. She wasn't the outlier who'd tanked the squadron. She was the pilot who'd taken a hard shot and survived the paperwork. Back at her desk, Maya reread the email once more and forwarded it to herself for her records. Then she opened her notebook to the inside cover where she'd written, years ago, "If I can hear them, I don't leave them." She added a line beneath it, today's date, and 3 words she hadn't been sure she'd get to write. still cleared. Worth it. The base felt different once the ruling came down, but mostly in the way people looked at her. The desert, the heat, the smell of fuel, those stayed the same. What changed was the small, invisible label over her head. The pilot who fired anyway and didn't get burned. She went back to flying local sorties. Currency flights, range workups, nothing dramatic. On one of those afternoons, she was up at 15,000, alone in a practice area, watching the sun push long shadows over the dunes. The radio was quiet. For the first time since Wadi Midian, there was no screaming in her headset, no cold theater voice, just wind and engine. And in that quiet, the question she'd been putting off came back. Was I brave, or was I just angry at the system? She thought of the mountain mission years ago, the one where she'd orbited and obeyed and arrived too late. That was the splinter under everything. Had she overcorrected in Wadi Midian because she couldn't stand to feel that again? Or because it was objectively the right call? The updated Frago landed in the squadron inbox that evening. Stroud briefed it the next day. New language, he said, laser pointer dancing on the slide. If you have on-scene SA and a ground force declaring imminent loss, you may deviate to engage, provided you can demonstrate target separation from protected sites and you capture the data. This is narrow, this is not carte blanche, but it's better than what we had. He flicked the pointer at her without naming her. This came out of a real fight. Learn from it. Don't romanticize it. A couple of pilots glanced at Maya. She kept her face neutral. It was odd, watching the system adapt around a choice you made in a cockpit because you couldn't stand to hear men die. On paper, it looked tidy. In the air that night, it had not been tidy. Later, in her room, she opened her inbox and found a message routed through ops from an unfamiliar .mil address. Subject, for Hog 2-1. No body text, just an audio attachment. She put in her earbuds and hit play. It was the JTAC, but not the frantic version she'd heard in the Wadi. This was him in a calm place, maybe a tent, wind-ruffling fabric nearby. Hey, Hog, he said. Ranger 3 from Midian. They told me you got looked at for that run. I figured I should tell you this part too. He paused as if choosing. Specialist Keen. He was the one we were working when the MG was hitting the wall. Surgeon says getting him out when we did is why he's keeping the leg. Couple minutes later, maybe not. Couple minutes later, maybe he bleeds. So, whatever heat you took, just know some kid gets to walk because you didn't listen to somebody watching a screen. There was a faint laugh, tired but warm. That's all. You did what we needed. Thanks. The file ended. Maya sat on the edge of the bunk, elbows on her knees, the earbuds still in. The whole HQ email with its formal language about commander's discretion suddenly felt so small next to that. Not because the HQ part didn't matter, it kept her flying, but because it wasn't the reason she'd done it. This was a medic hunched over a bleeding soldier, convinced the sky was about to help, and then the sky actually helping. She let herself feel proud, but only for a moment. Then she walked herself through the harder part. She had disobeyed. She had done it carefully, surgically, but she had still broken the flow. If another pilot tried to copy her without the same SA, without the same offset, without the same desperate ground call, they could make a mess. That too was part of her legacy now. She wrote in her notebook again, deviate only for people, never for ego. Capture everything. Make it defensible. The next morning, she caught Bunker in the hall. He looked less prickly. Heard you got a thank you, he said. Yeah, she said. You would have done it too. He considered, then nodded once. Maybe. Now I know how to do it right. That, she realized, was another quiet outcome. Her pain-in-the-neck mission had handed the younger pilots a template. Not ignore HQ, but if it's really that bad, this is how you survive it. That night, she stood on the flight line at dusk, watching other hogs come in, their wings dark against the sky. She ran a hand over the skin of her own jet. It was just aluminum and rivets and a gun. It didn't care about memos. It only cared what you did when you pointed it at people who needed you. The inquiry was over, the rules were clearer, and the voices from the dirt had been heard. What was left was the simplest test of all. Could she fly again, by the book, with the same heart? Tomorrow she'd find out. The call came in just before sunset, when the desert took on that muted, forgiving color and the heat finally broke. Maya was already on the schedule for a routine sortie. Pattern work, some range time, but ops stuck their head into life support. Hog 2-1, update. Possible tick west of Route Indigo. You're now primary. New Frago applies. New Frago. The one partly written because she'd pulled a trigger in a valley. She nodded. Copy. Loading the update. In the cockpit, she scrolled through the data link messages as the A-10C taxied. There it was in crisp text. If on-scene SA plus ground imminent loss plus no alternate fires, aircrew may prosecute with full data capture. Clean. Sanctioned. Someone in HQ had turned her bad night into a flowchart. She took off into a cooler sky. The AO wasn't far, a rolling shelf of terrain, not as tight as Wadi Midian, but rough enough to give an enemy confidence. On the assigned Freck, the JTAC, different voice, less panicked, was already working. Dagger 1, this is Lancer 9. We are taking sporadic fire from the ridgeline to our north, not yet fixed. Civi compound 300 meters west. We can maneuver, but fires would speed it up. That alone told her this wasn't Midian. They could move. They just preferred not to get shot doing it. Lancer 9, Hog 2-1 checking in. One ship, 30mm, 2x GBU 38, rockets, playtime 40. I have the Frago. Good to have you, Hog, the JTAC said. Calm, professional. ISR is overhead, feed is good. Stand by for talk on. She smiled behind her mask. ISR was overhead. Nobody was pulling it away at the worst second. The system had actually learned. She climbed to the assigned block in the CAS stack, deconflicted from a rotary pair working south. Her sensors picked up the ridgeline, and ISR, on a separate link, painted the suspected enemy position. She could see the civilian compound to the west. Real pattern of life there. Vehicles, heat, people moving. That was the kind of place theater rightfully flinched from. The enemy, of course, was trying to be near it. Lancer, Hog has the compound and the ridge. Confirm enemy is east of compound, on the military crest? Affirm, the JTAC said. And for SA, if we get pinned, we have authority under the new Frago to call you danger close. Right now, we are not pinned. She let that sink in. The ground was quoting the Frago to her. The thing born from her fight was now in their repertoire, too. Copy all, she said. Let's keep it not pinned. She set up for a pass, sensors slewing, eyes scanning for any sign of civies drifting toward the fight. None. ISR confirmed. The JTAC's talk-on was neat, not the desperate spray of words she'd heard from Razor 3. From the compound, 300 meters east, trench line, possible PKM. Effects there will let us push. This will be a single, short guns, east to west, offset away from compound, she said. You cleared hot? cleared hot. That was it. No one screaming abort, no one pleading from the dirt. Just a joint team moving fast, within the rules, because the rules finally made room for urgency. She rolled in. Not as low as Midian, no need. Her pipper tracked the trench. She felt the familiar tension in her hand, but this time there was no question in it. She squeezed off a short burst. The hog kicked, dust popped along the trench. ISR confirmed movement ceased. Good effects, hog, the JTAC said. We're pushing. She climbed back up, the sun pouring orange over the canopy. Down below, friendlies advanced in controlled bounds, not desperate scrambles. She captured the data, marked the engagement, just like the Frago wanted. Neat, defensible, effective. As she circled, she checked in with herself the way she'd promised in her notebook. Was I doing this for them? Yes. Was I doing this to prove I was right about Midian? Maybe a little. But the difference was, today she didn't have to break anything to do the right thing. The path was already cleared. When she RTB'd, the debrief was almost boring. ISR screenshot, JTAC log, BDA. No colonels dialing in, no JAG taking notes. Stroud glanced over the form and signed it. See, he said. You can fly disciplined. I always could, she said. I just needed the rules to recognize the fight we're actually in. He smiled. Well, now they do, at least for a while. That night, she sat outside the squadron, boots up on a low wall, watching the last sorties come home. The desert was cooler, smelling faintly of oil and dust. Somewhere not far, a medevac bird lifted off, rotors thumping. She thought of Specialist Keene, of Razor 3's voice, of Staff Sergeant Ortiz saying, "We were dead until she ignored you." She hadn't ignored them. And after everything, after the tapes and the memos and the frowns, she still had a jet to fly. That was the ending she could live with. Not spotless, not heroic in capital letters, but honest. A pilot who, when the choice came down to a human voice in the dirt or a distant voice on a net, chose the human, and then proved she could still wear the uniform the next day.